It is difficult and almost impossible to accept that a passenger ferry of this size could leave port with its bow doors widely open. A large, modern vessel built for routine crossings with its entire crew on board. And yet, one of the most basic safety barriers on board had not been secured. For this story to make sense, we must first understand the structural design of the ship. The Herald of Free Enterprise was a triple-screw roll-on/roll-off passenger and vehicle ferry built by Schickau Unterweser in Bremerhaven, Germany, and completed in 1980. The vessel had a gross register tonnage of 7,951 tons and a net register tonnage of 3,439 tons. The overall length was 131.9 meters, with a length of 121.1 meters between perpendiculars. The Herald of Free Enterprise had an enclosed superstructure above the bulkhead deck, meaning that the area above the main structural deck was built up with walls and a roof to house passenger spaces and additional vehicle decks. In ship design, for this enclosed space to be counted as part of the vessel's intact stability, it had to be weathertight. There is an important distinction between watertight and weathertight boundaries. Watertight boundaries are designed to withstand water pressure from either side. They are intended to contain water even if flooding occurs and water accumulates against them. Weathertight boundaries, by contrast, are designed only to prevent the ingress of water from the weather-exposed side under normal sea and weather conditions. They are not intended to retain water once flooding has occurred inside the space. The lower car deck, also known as the G deck, was located above the bulkhead deck and formed part of the ship's enclosed superstructure. It was designed as a large, open vehicle space, extending across the full width of the vessel and over a considerable length. Like other modern roll-on, roll-off ferries, this deck had no internal watertight subdivision. Its design allowed vehicles to be driven straight on and off the ship through bow and stern doors, ensuring fast turnaround in port. However, because it was above the bulkhead deck, the deck's contribution to the ship's stability depended entirely on it remaining dry. The lower car deck, together with its doors and surrounding structure, On the bridge, the ship was being handled using combinators, engine controls that link propeller pitch, engine revolutions, and throttle into a single lever to produce a chosen speed. The wing engines did not use true combinators. They ran at constant revolutions, and only the propeller pitch changed, with the engine automatically taking up the load. The center engine, however, was controlled by a true combinator, with a trimming wheel set to maximum, though the engine settings had been adjusted to avoid overloading it. Both the master and the deck officers later said that when entering or leaving Zeebrugge with the ship trimmed by the head, they were careful to limit speed. The reason was simple: to prevent water coming over the bowsprit. These ships were designed for rapid acceleration. Their engines could go from idle to full load very quickly, and their propellers were built to accept that load without difficulty. As the Herald passed the outer mole, Captain Lurie set Combinator 6 on all 3 engines. The ship accelerated rapidly, from about 14 knots toward a possible 18 knots. And as the speed increased, 2 things happened at the bow. First, the ship began to sink slightly deeper into the water due to dynamic squat. Second, the bow wave grew higher. Near the end of this acceleration, that combination forced seawater over the bowsprit and straight into G deck. Model tests and full-scale trials had already shown that at Combinator 6, the bow wave would climb well up the bow doors, as much as 2 meters above the spade. In other words, at this speed, water coming aboard was not just possible, it was inevitable. A large volume of water rushed onto G deck and the ship lurched violently to port, the heel coming almost instantly and reaching around 30 degrees as the water spread across the wide vehicle deck and destroyed stability in seconds, before running to the port side and collecting there, so that, for a brief moment, the ship seemed to settle again, but only at a severe and unnatural angle. Through the open bow doors, huge quantities of water continued to pour in, and this time the roll to port was slower, but unstoppable, with the Herald of Free Enterprise tipping further and further until she passed 90 degrees and ended up on her side on the seabed, with evidence suggesting that she lay almost on her beam ends for about a minute, before finally coming to rest. The speed of the capsize left no time to launch lifeboats or use most life-saving equipment, leaving only life jackets, which were stored in locked lockers near the muster stations on C deck, on both port and starboard sides, each holding hundreds of jackets with the keys kept in small glass boxes beside the doors. And when the ship rolled over, the starboard lockers would have opened downward while the port side lockers were submerged. That survivors later reported masses of life jackets floating in the water, some likely forced out by their own buoyancy, yet instead of helping, many of these jackets made things worse. As the floating pile blocked swimmers and trapped others below the surface, and those who managed to grab one struggled to put it on, fighting tangled straps with freezing hands and trying to understand what to do in darkness and confusion. In the minutes after the Herald of Free Enterprise capsized, rescue came quickly from many directions. Belgian helicopters, Navy divers, and emergency crews were first on scene, soon joined by British, Dutch, and German forces. On shore, police, firefighters, ambulances, hospitals, and Red Cross volunteers mobilized to help survivors. The response was determined and well coordinated, even though helicopter noise, glare, and downwash made communication and movement difficult. The ship capsized because both the inner and outer bow doors were left open. The assistant bosun, Mark Stanley, had the duty to close them, but he had fallen asleep and missed the call to harbor stations. After the capsize, he helped rescue trapped passengers and was badly injured in the process. The bosun, Terence Ailing, did not close the doors because he believed it was not his responsibility, though he later took charge of rescue efforts inside the ship. There was also confusion among the officers. The chief officer and second officer misunderstood who was in charge of loading and securing the ship. No clear report was made to the captain before sailing. The captain assumed the work had been done, but he did not demand confirmation. This was not the first time such a failure had happened. Similar incidents had occurred before. Instructions existed, but they were unclear and often ignored. The deeper problem was the company's management. Duties were poorly defined and responsibility was blurred. A system like that left room for a single mistake to become a disaster. Tragically, 193 passengers and crew lost their lives. 409 people others survived thanks to rapid rescue efforts.